Here's a brief essay that I wrote a little while ago titled, Is a Grand Unified Theory of Leadership Possible? Is a grand unified theory of leadership possible? In other words, a gut theory of leadership possible. Would it be possible to provide persons studying and practicing leadership with a general guide, a set of principles that are universal, which can be adapted to different situations, so as to legitimize a field that many skeptics dismiss as lightweight and ill-defined, fragmented, and trivialized? A current tension exists between two approaches. One which can be characterized as descriptive, with emphases on leadership behaviors, traits, contingencies, cognition, culture, in other words, what persons actually do, various multidisciplinary approaches informed by the social sciences. The other, which can be characterized as prescriptive or normative, with emphasis on what persons ought to do in leadership, in leader-subordinate relationships. And this type of literature deals with the various how-to pamphlets and books that you find in abundance in bookstores and online and so forth. They deal with how-to the best practices, steps to success. You have such titles as the Tao of Leadership, the Zen of Leadership, and so forth and so on. All sorts of literature like that. These are multidisciplinary approaches informed by, I think, pop cultural philosophies of leadership. Now, could this tension, roughly labeled a divide between the sciences and the humanities, can this tension be bridged by a unitary, integrated articulation of leadership? In other words, a grand unified theory. To begin with, maybe certain preconditions for leadership would be considered. Number one, what is it about the human condition that makes leadership necessary? Two, what makes it possible? Three, what processes or conditions characterize the emergence, maintenance, and transformation of leadership? Two ways of responding to these questions appear. In one way, the world of the leader-subordinate relationship is viewed as a world of disorder and entropy, with a great deal of material scarcity, a lack of accessible survival knowledge, inequality, a need for dependence, and variability in competence and access to power. Out of this comes a need for leadership. The goal of leadership is control. Inequality is the greatest value, and it is at the heart of leadership. Leadership is a compliance-gaining process. The leadership relation is seen as a product of consent. Once consent is in place, leaders initiate narratives and framings to help the group understand the world, themselves, and other groups, and suggest solutions and problems. In another way, the world of the leader-subordinate is viewed as a world in which humans differ in their capabilities, and in which leadership arises from the physiological and social needs, and the desire for expression, communication, and co-construction of reality. Leadership is the act of constructing meaning in this way. It is a creative act, bringing new realities into being. In general, living in this world involves exercising imagination and creativity, self-reflection, and egalitarian interaction. Leadership is less about control than the mutual management of meaning. Equality is the greatest value. Leadership is the egalitarian negotiations process. Bringing together the best of both views, we may get something like this definition as the next step. Leadership is an influence process, both visible and invisible, in a society inherited, constructed, and perceived as the interaction of persons in conditions of inequality, an interaction measured by ethical and moral values, and by the degree of realization of intended, comprehensive, and durable change. Furthermore, the human condition can be defined as one of wants and needs among masses of persons who lack the knowledge, of how to gain these things, which creates the need for leadership. The job of the leader is to legitimate certain wants, and to educate and instruct and guide persons towards solutions. Much of this, I think, James MacGregor Burns. Or maybe this definition: the essence of leadership is to make sure that the organization knows itself. There are certain durable principles that underlie an organization. They are fundamental, having to do with human relationships and the obligation of the organization to its individual members. The second job of the leader is to pick the right persons to be part of the organization and to create an environment where those persons can succeed. The leader should be a coach, not an executive. The third job of the leader is to be accessible, open to persons in a broad range of their experiences in life if they need it, and to be accessible for two-way communication that is honest, open, and direct. And I express my thanks here to Mort Meyerson. So, what could be the third step in fashioning a gut of leadership, a grand unified theory? Well, consider this statistically amenable matrix. On the horizontal row, we place our two broad categories of approaches to leadership, which have to be carefully defined. The descriptive approach with its with these underlying cells: behavior theories, trait theories, contingency theories, cognition theories, culture theories, and the prescriptive approach with the underlying cells containing some of the most compelling pop cultural tracks on leadership. Cheese, for example, Fred and Fish come to mind. I'm sure you're familiar with them. On the vertical row, we place carefully defined categories such as personal characteristics, situational response, transaction tendencies, transformation tendencies, ethics, context, participants, power, level of action, types of analyses, human nature, process, conflict, change, power, information data, methodology, etc. By filling in the cells, we might be able to accomplish at least four things. First of all, we might be able to identify some central differences in the premises for each group that may militate against an integrated view. Secondly, we might be able to provide insights into the source of these differences. Thirdly, identify similarities between the groups that may contribute to an integrated view. And finally, reveal the extent to which broadly different approaches to the study of and application of leadership seek answers to identical questions. With the completion of these three steps, perhaps the formulation of a truly integrated or unified theory of leadership would become feasible. Might be an interesting project.